Madhouse, founded in 1972, has been a cornerstone of the anime industry for decades. While as of recent years, their presence in the scene hasn't exactly been stellar, but that doesn't take away from the massive accomplishments that they've achieved throughout their lifespan. Madhouse is responsible for some of the most popular and successful adaptations in the space with shows like Death Note and Hunter x Hunter, also creating some great original pieces of work such as Summer Wars, Perfect Blue, and Death Parade. One of Madhouse's first successes that would be one of the sparks to their eventual path of becoming a household name came in the form of 1998's Trigun, based off the manga of the same name that was created by a man named Yasuhiro Naitao. After Trigun's initial 2-year run, it was picked up in the form of Trigun Maximum, which would release up until 2007. However, in 2002, Naitao, alongside Red Entertainment, released a video game on the PlayStation 2 that has become a sort of cult classic. A year later, in 2003, Madhouse would adapt the video game, creating one of my all-time favorite anime and one of my favorite stories ever told. That story is Gungrave. Gungrave is one of those anime that if people ask me for recommendations, it's always one of my first responses. It's become a sort of gut instinct as I really want more people to experience this story that I love so much. And despite it having almost 180,000 users having watched it on my anime list, I never hear anyone mention the show, yet alone talk about it. Though that's not to say that no one's ever talked about it, as there are some great videos you can find that cover the series, but that number's pretty scarce. So, what is Gungrave? Well, to answer that, we'll be taking a look at the first episode as it does a great job of introduction and presenting the general plot of the story. Fair warning, I'll be spoiling the information told in the first episode, but in order for me to tell you what Gungrave is about, this is pretty necessary. Or if you just want to take my word for it and jump right in without knowing anything, then you're more than welcome to, but for the next minute or so, potential spoilers. Episode 1 begins with a voiceover, a man reminiscing over his past, questioning what went wrong and how things ended up like this. Cut to a behemoth of a man standing up out of a chair with wires ejecting out of him like he's Frankenstein's monster. After grabbing 2 pistols the size of cannons, he proceeds to take out these abominations of creatures, what seem like a hybrid of zombies and demons, but are actually called Orcmen. This man is our protagonist, Brandon Heat, aka
Grave. Beyond the grave.
And if you're wondering where the letters BTG in my name comes from, then look no further. Gungrave takes place in a world of crime, a world where murder and theft are common occurrences, and one where a mafia that goes by the name of Millennium stands on top. As Dr. T explains, Brandon used to be a sweeper for this organization, a hitman if you will, and was one of the best. That is until, as he puts it, Brandon went to sleep, but in reality was actually murdered. By the end of the episode, after Harry McDowell, the head of Millennium and Brandon's former best friend, looks at a picture of Grave, he snaps, questioning if Brandon will betray him again and claiming that he'll kill him as many times as it takes. Preceding this, we're thrown into the past where most of our story takes place, witnessing Brandon and Harry's rise to the criminal underworld and what exactly happened between the two that would create such a reaction out of Harry. Then, tying back to the first episode, we return to the present to watch Grave begin his path of revenge against the organization that murdered him. Gungrave is a tale of ambition, love, trust, betrayal, family, and so much more that cultivates into this multi-genre fucking masterpiece of visual storytelling. And in my opinion, a lot of the credit as to why the story is so well told goes to the series head writer, Kuroda Yosuke, and the director, Tsuru Toshiyuki. The plot of the original game is pretty bare as it's just a flat-out shoot-'em-up tale of revenge solely through the eyes of Grave. Kuroda and Tsuru used the plot as a basis for the story and thoroughly expanded it by fleshing out and improving upon every aspect of the original while keeping the core of the series intact. The ability to turn a third-person shooter into essentially a dramatic noir crime story is extremely commendable, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. One of the many aspects as to why I think this anime is so great is in its pacing. While the series does flash back to the past and primarily take place there, when we're taken back to the present, it's done in a way that feels extremely natural. Nothing ever feels jarring or out of place. It's all one smooth transition that beautifully comes full circle into one of the best conclusions I've had the pleasure to watch. Another aspect, and probably my favorite of the bunch, is the story's script, and specifically the storytelling between the lines. To me, one of the signs of a well thought out script is the act of showing rather than telling. As an audience member, being told information flat out constantly rather than having to figure it out for yourself can sometimes feel condescending and annoying. Sure, there's information that needs to be spoken into existence, but if a character is scowling, I don't need them to tell me that they're angry. I can see that. The point I'm trying to make is that Gungrave is an excellent example of showing rather than telling. Now, whether that's in a character's expressions, mannerisms, small bits of dialogue, or simple creative choices as to how a scene is framed, there's so much that's unspoken yet so easily digestible for the viewer. And I think this is extremely evident in the two best episodes of the show, episodes 14 and 26. Now, like I said, episodes 14 and 26 are the two best episodes that the show has to offer, but I should also note that they're two of the best anime episodes I've ever seen in general. The talent of Kuroda's writing and Tsuru's direction really shines in these two, exemplifying their competence and skill in their respective craft. Tsuru also did the storyboards for both, which I think strengthens the pair so much more. Now I could go on and on about these two, but that's for another video, as I plan on covering each 14 and 26 in the future. Just a heads up for both of these two episodes though, you might need some tissues, potentially a box, as for me, the emotions that these two episodes produced made me wish I had one. More so 26, as it's the finale and holy shit does it hit like a truck. There's very few anime out there that have made me cry or get teary-eyed, and I'll happily admit that Gungrave is one of them. It's one of those endings that I wish I could go back and watch for the first time, as the end of these characters' journeys is just so fucking memorable. And speaking of that, let's talk about characters. Gungrave has a pretty abundant cast, from Bob Max, an overweight gluttonous intelligent operative from Millennium, to Bear Walken, one of the coldest characters I've seen in an anime, and the man who trained Brandon. There's a lot of noteworthy characters, however, I primarily want to focus on the two leading men and the two foundations for the overall story, Harry and Brandon. Firstly, let's talk about Harry. Harry McDowell is first and foremost a leader, a man whose ambition is second to none. One who strives for the top and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty in order to reach that place. And alongside that drive lies a tremendous amount of charisma, easily winning people over to rally behind him and by extension his dream. Remind you of anybody? Jokes aside, while I don't think Harry's on the same stature as Griffith, I still consider him to be a fantastic character. Throughout the course of the story and among the many characters presented, Harry's arc is easily one of the most interesting. Witnessing the rise from the slums of Desolation Alley to the leader of a mafia and the various forms of sacrifices that it took is a visual grail of humanistic storytelling and the effect one's ambition has on a person. That's not to mention the countless great character moments he has within the show, in particular his incredible dynamic between
生と死は隣り合わせだ。誰もが奪い、誰もが与えることができる。この雨のように、誰にでも分け隔てなく降り注ぐ。
Brandon Heat, our protagonist of the story and without question my favorite character within it. While Harry is a man of desire and aspiration, Brandon is one of loyalty, honor, and so much goddamn heart. In all honesty, he's one of the most selfless characters I've ever come across in any piece of fiction. Every choice or decision he makes feels out of necessity to the people he loves or the organization he's sworn loyalty to, as he values his personal relationships above all else. And despite the crimes he commits as a sweeper, he chooses not to think about the physical or mental toll they have on his soul. So as long as the people in his life are happy, he's able to find a form of content. This inner monologue from episode 7 speaks to it far better than I ever could.
あの頃の昔の俺に言ってやりたい。なあブランドン、守るってことは他人のために自分を顧みないことだ。でも守り続けることは違う。守り続けるってことは裏切らないことなんだ。決して。
To me, this is a trait that I find extremely admirable, and that's just the tip of the iceberg as to what makes Brandon so great. As I mentioned previously, Gungrave excels at showing rather than telling, and Brandon is the prime example of that. As each episode unfolds, we start to see Brandon open up, but for the most part, he's a man of few words. I think that Brandon's silence and the mannerisms within that silence can sometimes speak far louder than any words necessary. The joy, sadness, or anger that's portrayed through his facial expressions mixed with the context of the scene makes it seem more like I'm watching a Scorsese film rather than an anime. This is of course a testament to the entire team, from the writing of his characterization to the direction and of course the animation. Which leads to my next point, the animation. Visuals are important to any anime there is. To some, it can be the deciding factor of picking up a show or throwing it to the side and completely ignoring it. Now, considering that Gungrave came out 20 years ago come this fall, I think it's safe to say that a large majority of people would consider the animation to feel a bit dated. Obviously, over the past 2 decades, there have been some staggering improvements in tech, with studios like Ufotable and Kyoto Animation creating some of the most visually appealing anime known to date. So yeah, Gungrave may feel a bit dated at times, but in my eyes it's perfect for what it is. Gungrave's gritty, mafia-oriented story doesn't need to visually look extremely clean. While I still think that the show looks great and would of course welcome updated visuals, I appreciate the team's effort into their original vision so much more. I mean, in comparison to some of the other shows coming out in 2003, Gungrave is extremely impressive. Whether it be the intricate shootouts or the stunning lingering wide shots that will be cemented in your memory, Gungrave offers some incredible imagery. There's so much style and bravado packed into every frame that just exudes off the screen, creating an extremely unique visual style that's aided by series creator Madhouse character designs. Not to mention, it's just so damn charming. It's easy to tell when there's no love behind a project, and thankfully, Gungrave is one that's rich in it. Before I wrap this up, I quickly want to touch on a couple more things. Firstly, the music, which is fucking great. It's a jazz-inspired soundtrack that fits the narrative to a T and effectively complements each scene. The percussion, piano, strings, and brass all perfectly swell together and really help that feeling of immersion. You get tracks like When, which sounds like it came straight out of a nightclub scene from a noir film, or my personal favorite, Bitter Ending, a beautiful violin-centered song that I feel serves as a perfect music representation of the story. And yeah, the opening and ending both slap. Scooby-Doo's ending theme, yes, the band is named Scooby-Doo, is right up there with Akuma no Ko with some of my favorite endings. Secondly, I'd sort of mentioned it before, and they aren't the exact same, but if I had to give an approximation as to a dynamic that's similar between Brandon and Harry, it would be the dynamic between Guts and Griffith. Now, I won't speak any further into it to avoid spoilers, but trust me when I say that if you like the dynamics present in Berserk, then you're probably gonna like Gungrave. The recommendation subpage on my anime list for Berserk 97 is the sole reason I found this masterpiece in the first place, so to totally rad, whoever you are, I'll be forever in your debt. Given that the handful of videos covering this series are all similarly titled to this one, I think it's safe to say that my sentiment about this show isn't unrecognized. It's a timeless noir gangster-inspired anime based off a video game that doesn't feel like it's a video game adaptation. Whether it be from the excellently written dialogue or the wonderful direction, Gungrave is one of those shows that's hard to forget. It manages to delve into so many different themes and genres seamlessly, but its core values of loyalty and family is where the show hits the hardest for me. It's a story about the bonds between people, bonds of brotherhood, love, malice, and the lasting effects that these bonds have. It's a show that continuously keeps on giving after countless rewatches, and one that deserves so much more credit than it's given. Gungrave is, without question, Madhouse's most underappreciated masterpiece. Thank you guys so much if you stuck around and watched. I really appreciate it, and hopefully I made a compelling enough argument to get you into the series. Anyways, hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.